But Darryl, you probably saw his bio there, actually impressive bio he's got. But Darryl began fishing back in '77 in Winnipeg, went to Sarnia for a bit, and then ended up in Edmonton. So I don't know if that was a personal choice or whatever, but he ended up in Edmonton. But anyway, 20 seasons with the CFL, and then retired in 2013, I think it was, and then started helping out with the supervisor roles for junior and youth sport. And so I'll leave it to Darryl to take it away, and he's looking after our 6 and 7 mechanics manual for officials. And go ahead, Darryl.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody, and hello. I guess as far as questions go, I would suggest popping things into the chat. I've got a couple of breaks built into the presentation where I can stop and kind of have a look through chat and see if there's anything that needs to be brought up. I think that's a little easier. We're running about 45 minutes and I've only got, I don't know, a couple hundred slides to go through, so we should be fine. Use the chat if you can, and let's see if we can make this work. So with any hope you are seeing a presentation opening slide. If that's not true, somebody speak up at me right now, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about mechanics for high performance football. The title of this has bounced around a little bit back and forth between elite football and going through the Football Canada stuff and the CFOA. I've seen the term high performance, and I think I like that a little bit better than elite. So that's what I've decided to use here. What I intend to talk about today is primarily an overview of the mechanics manuals. This presentation will use screen captures instead of video, but the videos that the screen captures come from will be available on the CFOA website, the same place that this presentation itself will be after we're done here today. So what is high performance football? It's CFL, U Sport, Canadian Junior Football, and senior leagues. So about 2 years ago, we started talking about how we're going to manage the whole concept of mechanics manuals. The history of this thing as it sits today, in particular with the mechanics for 7 officials, was this actually used to be only done in the CFL. And so as a result, the CFL had an entire manual that described how to work seven officials on the field. They also had a variation that they used for 6 officials that was different from what the actual or the official amateur mechanics were for 6 as well. Over time, this has kind of morphed down into university football and then junior football. I know there are some senior leagues that use 7 officials as well on the field, and there's a lot of leagues that use 6. What seemed to happen was that there was an ownership by the CFL, but the responsibility for development and training was actually down at the amateur levels. And so in order to try to streamline that and make things a little bit easier for the amateur associations to deal with what was going on, a new committee and a new process was struck in 2020. So now the ownership of both mechanuals for 6 and for 7 officials has been delegated and taken over by the CFOA, and specifically a subcommittee of the CFOA that's responsible for developing and maintaining the content for the mechanics for 6 and 7 officials. This committee consists of the 4 U Sport Conference referees in chief, representative from the CFOA, representative from the CFL, and a technical writer. And quite honestly, I'm the technical writer right now as well, so I guess I wear a couple hats in this process. The manuals themselves are published off of the CFOA website, and this whole thing is really in alignment with the new Football Canada certification program, where it's based on crew composition, and all of the training that is starting to be done with this is done in development in conjunction with the CFOA technical committee. So what have we done? We published this first document in 2019. We actually had our first real kick at a cat as a committee for 2020, and then 2020 never happened. So in 2020/2021, what did we do? We kind of kicked around the document formats. We made a bunch of editorial changes, and we made some slight changes, really minor changes actually, in coverage to what's being done on the field. As far as format goes, what we've done, hopefully made this simpler, probably not, is that we've now got separate documents for general mechanics, 6 officials, and 7 officials. And part of the reason for this was to simplify the actual management of the documents. There was an awful lot of duplication between the mechanics in 6 and 7, where we were describing the general requirements in both documents. Make a change in one, sometimes you have to make sure you go back and change 2. And actually the way it was being done was that we actually had 4, because we had an amateur and we had a mechanics manual. So from a document management perspective, it was getting very difficult, and changes weren't always being kept up the way they should have. Plus, what I hope we are starting to see now is that this becomes the foundation for some continued simplification of the general mechanics in this, as the other certification modules come online. And I really fully expect that much, if not most, of the content that we currently have in this general mechanics document will actually end up moving out of that document and into the other certification levels. And hopefully what we see here is really just the stuff that's exceptions when we start talking about high performance football. So like I say, what we have right now is a general mechanics document for high performance football. There is some content that's specific to the CFL. This was one of their requests, is that we make it easy for their people to see where the differences are. It's embedded in the master document, but it's formatted in a way that it's highlighted and only visible for the CFL when we publish it. Then we have spin-off documents, which are the specific crew documents for 6 and 7 officials, both for amateur and CFL. Like I say, from a management perspective, this is easier. From a user's perspective, time will tell. The crew-specific documents contain positioning and coverage diagrams. And so these are things that you've probably seen before, but in some cases it was easier to show both CFL and amateur together. And this sometimes, I think it actually simplifies the presentation a little bit and makes it easier for people to see what the differences are. Ultimately, like I say, all of these documents are available from a single source. It's either from the CFOA website or from the CFL website, depending on which level and leagues you're working in. So since 2019, we've done a bunch of work on editorial, ton of work in making the document gender neutral. And this aligns with the changes that have been made to the rule book, and is a massive step forward. And for those of you who work in university and junior bowl, we've done the same thing this year with the standards documents. So all of the 3 major documents that support what we do on the field are now in gender neutral format. Hope I got it all. I never say never. There's always the possibility that something slipped through, but we'll make those changes as we go. And then a general simplification. Again, the document that we started with was written probably in the early 70s. There was a lot of stuff that really just didn't apply to today's world. So we keep going through those kinds of things and make those changes as we find them. Anything of a general editorial nature isn't actually flagged as a change in the document, because if we did that, then you'd be totally overwhelmed with change bars. So when we publish changes to the content, then what we do is we flag that change, and we also try to list a summary of what those changes are at the very front, so that people are are aware of what's going on, and it's easy for you to see what we have. Of course, since we did the 2020 version, there were some editorial and formatting corrections that have been noted, and I thank people that have sent that to me. I really do need that. I mean, we want to put out a document that's as correct as possible. And so you're not hurting my feelings. If you flag an error, just send me a note or send a note to Henry Chu at CFOA, and we'll get these things fixed. So there's about 4 or 5 things, and really it is all formatting. I expect that that we'll have that published and available on the website somewhere towards the end of May this year. So the meat of the whole thing is in coverage. What do we talk about a little bit on coverage? Made some very minor adjustments to the starting positions for deep side, for scrimmage, kickoffs, and punts, specifically for 7 officials. We really didn't touch anything on the 6 official side of things. We also added some content on guidance on optimal coverage positions for generally for passes, and most of it really relates to deep side, but it's good information that I think kind of helps anybody as you're trying to figure out where you should be on the field. Wedge block is a new rule that's come in since we last were on the field, and so we've put in some content to describe who's responsible for covering wedge blocks and a little bit of what that looks like. We've also expanded some of the content around blocking below the waist, and this is really to clarify hopefully how this should be covered and who's responsible for what when it comes to dealing with this situation on the field. We start talking about starting positions for deep side. We've moved it from a hard 15 yards off the line of scrimmage to a range of 18 to 23 yards off the line of scrimmage. Tons of flexibility. You can basically go where it feels good for you, depending on what the game conditions are, what the team capabilities are, what your own abilities are. And really, I would say that for certainly in Canada West, and this is where I have the data is for Canada West and for Prairie Junior. A deep side official starting at 23 yards is going to have 80% of the passes completed in front of them. Very rarely will you have to be moving to cover deep passes. At least in the game out west, we don't see the deep passes very, very often. So, again, you'll have to adjust your positioning, but we're kind of giving you the leeway to decide what works for you in any particular game. Coverage zones remain the same. Sideline officials up to the deep side partner, deep side partners down to the corners, field judges, basically the center of the field. So none of that has really changed. Okay. What does that look like on the field? Well, we start talking about where's our initial positions. Now, I've taken this screen capture a couple seconds after the snap. The initial formation here was that we had 3 receivers to the top side, 1 receiver to the bottom, and a couple of backs in the backfield. Let me see if I can do something here. No, I can't. The deep side initially started at 15 yards off the line of scrimmage, and now we're kind of giving you that range of 18 to 23, whatever would make sense. Okay. So as this play unfolded, the outside receiver did an in route about 5 or 6 yards off the line of scrimmage. The deep side official started backing out immediately with the snap. When this, if you're going to do that and you're reading and this receiver comes up hard and you decide you have to move, at this particular point, when this receiver cuts the pattern off, then you should start breaking down your movement, and your really shot ought to be looking inside to see if there's any other receivers coming across. And in this particular case, we have one of the receivers coming from the other side of the field, potentially into the zone that would be covered by the deep side official. Okay. Unfortunately, as this play continued, this screen capture is from a couple of years ago. The deep side official on this play continued to back out. And the line of scrimmage official was kind of left on their own. The line of scrimmage official is picking up this receiver coming across the middle. The pass ends up being thrown right to the sideline. And when the pass is caught, the deep side official is about 35 yards downfield. So that's a massive gap between that official and the line of scrimmage official. Very difficult to provide support to that official when you're that far away. And so really the key that any of this, it doesn't matter what position you're working, it doesn't matter where your initial positions are, you really need to read the play and then react accordingly to that. In this particular situation, if the deep side official had broken down and stopped right where he is, right there, he would have been in a perfect position to cover the receiver coming across the middle deep. And he also would have been in the perfect position to support the sideline official with the ruling on the pass at the sideline. So read and then react. Just stop there. Just before I get into kickoffs, is there any questions on that side of things? Is there anything showing up in the chat screen?
Darryl, but a quick question, like the deep side guy, I mean, again, as you said, it's read and react, but did the receiver coming across like draw him down or anything, or did he's just backing up?
Just backing up.
Okay.
The deep receiver who's just below the Bell MTS.
Yep.
Continued to go out to the sideline, and at the end of the play was at about the 40 number. Never actually did break up field. So, you see this receiver coming across, you kind of take a look at the receiver, say, what's that person doing? And if that receiver does decide to break up field, then yeah, absolutely, you continue to go with it because now that's your spot. But it's there's several opportunities to make decisions. And sometimes the decision you make at the very beginning of the play isn't the same thing you want to be living with at the end of the play when it comes to movements and positionings.
Hey, Darryl, it's Bruce here. I like your idea of starting 18 to 23 because the guy doesn't have to move. And I find that if the officials aren't moving, they make better calls. They have better vision of the whole thing. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this isn't, I'm not the owner of the concepts. Okay. And I appreciate the compliment and I appreciate the sentiments, but at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of people that provide input to what we're actually doing on the field. And I'm the scribe. So I try to take that information and I try to capture it in a way that is as clear as I can possibly make it for my warped engineering brain, and hopefully the rest of you can understand what I've written. This type of material that you're seeing right now in front of you on the screen is what I hope that we are able to present as we start getting into the training for these specific mechanics, and give ourselves screen captures that we can look at, give ourselves videos that we can look at, where we're talking more about actual play situations than we are talking about diagrams like this that really don't mean a heck of a lot, right? This is a diagram. Wow. I've never actually seen a football field that looks like this. They all look like this. So this is where we hope to be going when we start talking about advances in training. And now that we all, well, yeah, everybody has access to online materials, we have the ability to do a heck of a lot more than we ever could even 5 years ago. Okay. Let's see if I can get this.
Darryl, there's a couple questions popping in there now. One is, do you recommend 18 to 23 for high school?
Well, if you're working 7 officials, that's 18. I probably wouldn't go any further than that personally, and I'm still probably having everything happen in front of me. I think in all of these things, these are a starting point. These are a guideline of where we position our resources on the field and what our responsibilities are as the plays evolve. I don't know who it was that coined the phrase after the ball is snapped, play football. Might have been Vern Heath, okay? But in any event, that's very true, right? React to the play that's in front of you, know where you are, know where your partners are. And if you have to make adjustments to things on the field, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
There was one other question there. How do these mechanics affect 4 or 5 man officiated games?
They don't. So what we're talking about here is specifically for 6 and 7. If,
I think I don't want to interrupt there,
Yeah.
Darryl, but I think some
Yeah.
people, a lot of places now, because I know, for example, in Nova Scotia, if we have bodies available, we'll go to 7 man. So I mean, it's all about what you have available at the time. It's more so, I think guideline, think about, you don't have to be hard, fast 15, play where you're comfortable. I mean, 25 is kind of far in high school to be that deep. You should never be with your field judge, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah, you'll see information out there if you're working high school and you're working 7 officials. It's a pretty static day for the most part. And your challenge is going to be to keep yourself engaged probably more than anything else. Okay, I'd like to move on and then we'll take another break in a couple slides and talk about some other things. So kickoff, this is a very minor adjustment. We said, I think it used to be 10 yards ahead of the deepest receiver. Now it's 10 to 15. None of the responsibilities change. None of the coverage zones change. Okay. What it actually looks like on the field. This is about 2 seconds after a ball's been kicked and the receiver is just in the process of catching it. So what are our coverages here? You have the umpire is moving in towards the hash marks, but is in actually very good position to be covering the area directly in front of the ball carrier and has a fantastic look at what's going on with this particular block. Sideline probably has the best look at this block on the outside, but this is also where the deep side starts to kind of move in, because what we're looking at here is first threat on the official to your side. So you could have 2 sets of eyes in this particular area. And then the field judge has the ball carrier, but now with wedge block responsibility being primarily the field judge in the area immediately in front of the ball carrier, you would have this area of responsibility as well. So it's kind of a thing of knowing where to look. You also, obviously have to blow time in, but at the same time, there's nothing going on with the receiver. So start taking a look at what's going on with the players coming downfield. Another kickoff, same game to the other side of the field. Deep side has got the first threat of the ball carrier. This is getting really close to the receiver who's down at the 20-yard line. And at this point, I would say deep side should be honing in on this action. Field judge has blocking primarily immediately in front of the ball carrier. Sideline has the action immediately in front of the ball. There's a block here that turns actually quite nasty, and sideline should be covering this. Referee has the responsibility, referee and umpire a little bit further upfield, immediately in front of the ball carrier, kind of like the second wave. So this is the block. It's almost this identical situation to what we had in the previous slide, just happens a little bit further upfield and the play's a little bit further developed. Okay, so this is where the referee ought to be looking, but in this particular case, the referee has actually overrun the angle and has ended up being blocked out by another player, so is unable to decide what's happening with these 2 players. In this case, it would have been much better for the referee to actually break down just a couple steps earlier. As you see this block developing, get yourself into a position where you're not going to be blocked out, and put yourself in a position where you can read what's going on. If this ball carrier does break through, you still have all the time in the world to get a little bit further inside if you have to, so that you can block this play in from the inside out. Okay. So questions on kickoffs, right? Anything that we want to talk about there? I can see the chat window now, so figured out how to do that. Okay. Punts, again, minor change there. I think we said 10 yards ahead of the deepest receiver on your side initially. We've kind of opened that up to 15, but punts probably more than any other of the kicking plays. You really do need to be aware of what's going on, both with the game and the win situations, what the kicker's ability is. You should be starting on the goal line if that goal line is potentially threatened by the kick, even if it puts you behind the receivers. Okay? In the CFL manual, we actually state a yardage where the line of scrimmage is at a certain yardage. Then they declare that they want the deep side officials on the goal line. We decided not to do that for amateur just because of the wide range of abilities of kickers. So we leave it up to you as a deep side official to understand what's going on in the game, understand what's going on with the players. And if you feel that that goal line is going to be threatened by a potential kick, then start there. Okay? At the end of the day, you need to put yourself in a position that gives you the best chance of ruling on what's likely to be the most likely threat in that particular play. Whether it's the ball going out of bounds in the corner, or whether it's a block on a player coming down to try to tackle the ball carrier. Okay? I see a question about wedge block. We'll talk about wedge blocks in a couple minutes. I'll put that, in fact, I think that's coming up right after we talk about punts. So if I don't answer your question there, then we'll make sure we talk about it. Okay? The initial coverage zones for punts don't change. Now, what I'm showing here is what happens off the line of scrimmage. And this is one of the changes that was brought in 2019, was an adjustment really primarily for the referee and umpire to try to give us better coverage on what's going on the line of scrimmage. So, oops, sorry. Let me go back. So, umpire is responsible for guard, center, guard. Umpire has no responsibility for coverage on the upbacks or the kicker. That is the referee's responsibility and the referee alone. Sideline officials, you have the tackle and the guard, and then the deep side have whatever's outside of that. Okay? And the reason for that, well, I'll get into that in a second. The reason for that is that we were having a terrible time covering the actions of the defensive team on the offensive line players as they're trying to get downfield to cover the punt. This is a problem in just about every league that plays football. So we made these adjustments, and I think we're seeing some better results with that. Okay. Downfield responsibilities don't change, right? Referee and umpire have the area in front of the ball carrier, kind of second wave. Sideline officials have the immediate area right in front of the ball carrier. Deep side has first threat on the ball carrier to their side of the field. Okay, I have a question. Would it be safe to say that deep side shouldn't be lining up between the goal line and 10-yard line, either be at the 10 or the goal line, not between? That's a great comment, and I agree. Don't hang yourself out to dry. If you think you're close enough to the goal line that it's going to be an issue, get to the goal line. If you're 15 yards in front of the ball carrier puts you at the 8-yard line, get to the goal line. Okay, that is the most important line on the field on that particular play. Make sure you're there, and the easiest way to cover something is to be there to start with. So yeah, great comment. Thank you very much. Okay, so punts. What does it look like? Typical punt formation. Referee is responsible for the blocking backs and the kicker. This is a very, very common formation in amateur football, 4 blocking backs. CFL, you'll see 3 typically. For the field judges, that was always a good clue as to which side the ball was going to be kicked to, because that's where the two blocking backs usually were. Umpire is responsible for center guard, center and the two guards, and is in good position in this particular play to be able to see what's going on. Okay. You can see the Manitoba player reaching out to touch somebody. He actually grabs this Saskatchewan player and spins him around. Umpire, if you're looking in the right place, then this is an easy call. Pre-snap, referee, yes, referee's got the snap, and that what we're talking about is once that ball's been snapped, who are you covering when it comes to blocking? Okay. But once that ball's been snapped, then the referee's attention shifts off the line of scrimmage into that first line. Umpire's attention stays in that area, and hopefully we'll stop a little bit of this dancing that's going on in the middle of the field. Okay, optimum coverage position. Okay. Like I said, for the most part, this was really addressing the positioning of the deep side officials and the age-old question: should you be upfield of the receivers or should you be in trail position? And the answer is yes. It really depends on a lot of factors. What we do say is that, and in this case, we're going to focus on the field judge because this is a great example of coverage by a field judge, and I don't know who it is. In fact, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Field judge has positioned himself about 12 yards away from the receiver, and we're saying optimum positioning is somewhere between 8 and 12. That gives you generally a good vision of what's going on in the field, and you're not too close. You're at a nice little distance. Things tend to slow down a little bit with distance, and you're not so far away that it doesn't look like you're engaged with the play. We want you to be stationary or breaking down if at all possible. Trying to rule on something at a full speed gallop is extremely difficult. So in this particular case, the starting position of the field judge was at about the 45-yard line. He reacted to the deep pattern, which came off of the near side of the field, turned, took 2 steps, and broke down. He's also in great position to be able to see separation between the two players and to rule on the actions of both players as this ball is coming in. The ball hasn't yet got there. It's that kind of fuzzy little blurry dot just to the left and above the field judge. And then ultimately, like I say, he's got a great view of both players and what they're doing. This screen capture is also an example of what not to do. In this particular case, the deep side official got hung up on something, and I don't know what. This was the outside receiver. The deep side official actually didn't move until the ball was thrown, which tells me that the deep side official was probably looking at the quarterback and not at his receivers, because as soon as the ball was thrown, he turned and ran. So he's a long ways away from the play. He's got absolutely no angle on the actions of the players. The body of the defensive back is blocking out whatever's going on by either the defensive back or the receiver, and he's moving at full speed. So not exactly the optimal position to be covering this play. Okay, wedge blocks seems to be the topic of the day. So what I know Kelsey's going to talk about wedge blocks in quite a bit of detail in the next section, and the rule and the interpretation. I don't want to get into that in this particular thing. What I do want to talk about is how do we cover it. Okay, so primarily this is the field judge's responsibility when we have 7 officials on the field, If we are working with 6 officials or 5 officials where we have 2 deep officials covering punts, then it would be shared between the 2 deep officials. Okay. But other officials need to be aware because there is overlap, and sometimes things happen in places that we don't necessarily expect it to be happening. So what does it look like on the field? Back to this first screenshot. Okay. Field judge's primarily responsibility for determining whether or not we have a wedge block. And a wedge block is a formation. It doesn't necessarily have to be any contact. The foul occurs when the formation is set up and the players move upfield together. Okay. And so this is the field judge's responsibility right off the bat. So other than starting the clock, you really don't have any reason to be zeroing in on the ball carrier. Look through if you're in a position to, but recognize that this is your primary responsibility. In this particular case, where we've got a ball that's kicked to the far side of the field, both the deep side official on the near side and the sideline official should be moving in towards the hash marks, not to the hash mark, but towards the hash marks, just so that you can maintain contact with the play as it goes away. If you sprint to the hash marks, there's always the good chance that that play is going to come your way and you're in trouble. Okay. So it's towards, it's under control. Really what we're trying to do is get you to set up your angles on the blocking and get you in a position that if you do have to throw a flag, you're not throwing it from 60 yards away. Okay. So here's what we're talking about, where field judge has got these 3 players forming up, and there's no immediate threat on the ball carrier from the far side of the field. So the deep side officials should be in a position to help out with this as well. This is an example of how it's really easy to see these things from up here, right? Whether we're looking at a video or anything else. It's going to take a little practice to see what it looks like on the field. Right. Another situation, it doesn't always happen with the 3 players or the blockers immediately in front of the ball carrier. In this particular play, we have 3 players that in the front wave actually form up and proceed upfield in a formation, and this is an illegal wedge block. Okay. But the field judge's primary responsibility for these players, so that means that this coverage has to come from the sideline officials. There is no contact between any of these players. And I know one of the things that I kind of personally struggled with as I was, and sometimes still do, is who do I look at? Do I look at team A or do I look at team B? Well, I think the answer is now you look at team B, the receiving team, until there's contact with team A, the kicking team. Okay, because what you want to be able to decide and rule on is, do we have this kind of an illegal formation forming up? And this is usually going to happen before there's contact. Okay, this happens like 2 or 3 seconds into the play, and then by 3 or 4 seconds into the play, boom, we have 20 people coming together in mass mayhem, and that's a different kind of a question. So I'll stop here and ask if there's any questions on wedge blocks or field goals.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions on that, Darryl. So with the wedge blocking, so that's usually going to happen in the instance on a punt for the receiving team. So just trying to clarify, so that's 3 or more players within like, they don't necessarily have to be like shoulder to shoulder per se.
Yeah, it's within 2 yards.
Within 2
So
yards.
three or more players within 2 yards and moving upfield in formation.
No, I also noticed with that you said it is primarily the job of the field judge. Now, is that then to say your deep side or sideline official, if they see it before the field judge, should they be pulling their flag if they see that the field judge isn't doing it?
So at this, well, frankly, at any level, there's so many overlaps in these coverages. And I think, I think a better philosophy is that 2 flags is better than no flags.
And so also kind of to further my question, should that flag be thrown before the ball's even snapped? Like as soon as you see that formation, if you see 3 or more within 2 yards, should your flag be thrown immediately or wait until the play progresses?
Okay, so you're talking punts. Nothing is wrong until after the ball is kicked.
So even if they're lining up within that 2 yards to 3 or more,
Right.
it's
right.
not until after the ball is kicked, then you throw your flag.
If they're still in that formation and if they move up together. It's extremely unlikely that this will happen on punts. Extremely unlikely. In fact, when the rule was actually written, it was written specifically for kickoffs.
Kickoff specifically. Now, is that to say you would never see that in a punt situation?
Yeah. Let me rephrase that. This rule comes from the CFL. When
Okay.
the CFL rule was written, and Jake, I know you're online, correct me if I'm wrong, but the CFL rule was intended to eliminate high impact situations on kickoffs where you have 2 teams and specifically a wedge and a wedge buster that are moving together from a long range, building up a ton of momentum, and the potential for injury is extremely high. The amateur rule as it's written says all kicks. And it doesn't mean it's not going to happen on a punt. It could, but just considering the way the teams line up for punts, right? On defense, yeah, I thought someone was going to ask that. On defense, on punts, you've got the majority of your players on the line of scrimmage. And then on the kick, they peel back. And you might have a couple players downfield, but the likelihood of having 3 or 4 players downfield in a position where they can actually form up like this, extremely low. Never going to say never. It's just
Hey,
extremely
Darryl.
low. Yep.
Darryl, Nigel here. I just, again, it's one of those things we start getting into discussions of stuff that's rarely going to happen. So anyway, I'll just let you know, you got about 7 minutes. So counting there. Okay, buddy.
Yeah, I'm on that. And I'm going to defer any other questions about the actual rule to Kelsey's presentation because he's in a much better position to answer these questions than I am. And we're good for time, but I want to make sure that I get into the next section, which is walking below the waist.
There you go.
Okay. Not a new rule. It's been around for a little while. Okay, I just want to reinforce some of the things that we're talking about with position. First and foremost, the 7 officials, where we have the umpire and the referee in the backfield, the referee and umpire starting positions help to define the blocking below the waist zone for other players. Okay. Stay with your keys. Understand what your keys are, know what they're doing, know where their positions are. What we've said in the mechanics is you're responsible for the positioning of your players. Don't rely on the umpire or the referee knowing whether a particular player has come into motion or has positioned themselves inside the box. That's your responsibility as a covering official. It's really no different from the way we've covered crackback blocks for decades, right? If you saw a crackback block, you were responsible for determining whether or not that player was outside the crackback zone at the snap, or whatever you did. This is the same thing, but stay with your keys. Having said that, the field judge is in a very good position to really have a good overview of what's going on in the backfield and should be a little bit more attuned to what's happening with blocking below the waist. So stay with your keys. In this particular play, third receiver to the inside is the field judge's responsibility, stays with his key and is able to make a good call downfield for an illegal block below the waist. Doesn't matter whether this player started inside the box or not. This block does not happen inside the box. This is an illegal block. Okay, stay with your keys. Talking about positioning. Okay, again, initial positioning of the umpire and the referee help to define where that box is laterally for other officials. This slot back, his initial position is inside the box. There is no tight end on that side of the field. He's occupying the position of the tight end. He is inside the box, and it goes in motion across the formation before the snap. So because he's stationary before the snap, going into motion, he does not have to stop again in order to be eligible to make a low block. He's already in the box before the snap. This is the responsibility of the field judge. In this particular formation, this is the number 3 receiver on that side of the field. Okay? Like any good field judge, the field judge has taken a position on the field that puts him outside of camera range. This is one of the finer points that we talk about when we talk about positioning for field judges. In this particular case, this block is below the waist, but above the knees. It's well inside the blocking below the waist zone, but it's still the field judge's responsibility to know what's going on with this particular player. This is your key. Okay. Some slightly different situations. We'll talk a little bit about backside coverage. In this play, the receiver starts outside the box, goes across the formation, and is blocked below the waist with the play going the other way. Okay. Arguably, everybody's attention is on what we see as the left side of the field, except the backside, sideline official, and deep side both have to be aware of and cover these kinds of actions behind the play. That's your primary responsibility on a play going the other way, is backside coverage. This is what that means. Okay, 2 more slides. Number 2 receiver is the responsibility of the sideline official and does a quick out pattern at the snap. Ball is in the air to the number 1 receiver when number 2 blocks the opponent below the waist. Whether or not this is a screen pass doesn't matter. It's an illegal block below the waist. Even though this is technically not the deep side's responsibility, the deep side official needs to be aware that the sideline official's attention is going to be going to the ball to rule on whether or not the ball is caught and whether or not it's a screen pass. Be prepared to switch your coverage. Okay. Both of you, this is in your line of vision. Okay, so either or both sideline officials should be able to see and rule on this action. 2 flags here would be perfectly fine. No flags is not acceptable. Okay, last scenario, know the situation, short yardage. So both the umpire and both sideline officials are going to be focusing on the ball in progress. That's where they're going to be looking. Okay. There's a tight end on display. The tight end is reported, and so the slot back is now outside the blocking below the waist zone. It's also the number 3 receiver on that side. Number 2, because technically you've got a tight end. But the field judge needs to be aware that this player is outside the zone. And any kind of motion across the formation really ought to be catching your attention. Field judge on a play like this, you really only have one responsibility, and that's to help out. It's not to be looking at the ball. This ball carrier blocks at a receiver below the waist. There's absolutely nothing happening with the number 1 receiver on the backside of the field. So the backside, deep side actually has the best chance of picking this up. As I say, sideline official on this side, they're focusing on forward progress. Don't ball hawk, don't guard air. Identify and understand where the main threats are and provide backside coverage if it's needed. Screen pass. Why is that not the deep side's responsibility? The block is made by the number 2 receiver. So technically that would be the sideline official's coverage. The number 1 receiver is the receiver who comes in and catches the ball. It all happens within 3 yards of each other. You ought to be able to see everything, right? So even though your key has gone inside, there's somebody else doing something right in front, and maybe even blocking your view. So be aware, switch coverages, soft eyes, and you should be good. So that's kind of where I'm at. I know I'm a couple of minutes over time. Last chance for any questions.
Darryl
Thank you very
Murray
much.
here. Murray
Yep.
Drinkwalder here, Darryl. I've just got a quick observation. Everybody seems to be getting hung up about this new wedge block rule.
Yeah.
I had a look at every kickoff from 45 games in the 2019 OUA season. I saw 2 wedge blocks.
Yeah.
It's something that is not being coached anymore, and I don't think we're going to see too many of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those 2 kickoffs were the first 2 kickoffs of the 2019 Prairie Junior season. I couldn't believe it because I had never really seen it either. And I didn't see another one after that. So, okay.
Thanks,
gonna
sir,
leave
Murray.
it at that.
Oh, thanks.
Angela, it's all yours.
Thanks, Darryl. Appreciate that. Hopefully the next time we do all this stuff, it'll be in person before the youth sports season starts in September. So see, I'm being optimistic here. So we'll see what happens going on. But again, thanks, brother. Appreciate that.